Welcome to the second episode of Matchup Analysis series dedicated to finding the perfect counter matchup for Gargoyle Flame Spear and its setups. For the sake of convenience, I will separate this video into two parts. First part will cover one-handed Gargoyle Flame Spear setups and second part will cover two-handed setup. As usual, before we get into the counters, we have to understand how those setups work and what makes them viable. Starting with probably the most famous one-handed Gargoyle Flame Spear setup, the one that pairs it with Estoc. On paper it looks sort of amazing. Estoc is lightning fast, has long reach and can proc counter hits, much like Gargoyle Flame Spear itself, making this setup ideal for luring abuse. Something that you may not know about Estoc and Flame Spear is that it's probably the most reliable setup for roll catches. Altering between R1 R1 L1 or L1 L1 R1 is almost guaranteed roll catch. So if your opponent panic rolls after your combo, you can easily get an extra hit in. I've been saying this for ages and I will continue to say it. Learning to roll properly is the best thing you can do if you want to improve in Dark Souls 3 PvP. The Estoc and Gargoyle Flame Spear setup became popular back when FromSoft forgot to adjust the offhand poke speed on Estoc, so it kind of made sense since you were making the best use of it that way. However, as of now, I don't really think that this setup is that good. To understand the logic behind this statement, you have to investigate what each weapon does in this setup. Gargoyle Flame Spear is probably second best weapon for applying neutral pressure, surpassed only by the Washing Pole. It has an insane range that is offset by its dashing attack being a bit slower when compared to Washing Pole, so it is relatively easy to dodge, but oh boy, it's almost impossible to space it. The spear in this case is used to apply neutral pressure and chase your opponent, while the offhand weapon like Estoc is being used for pretty much everything else like whiff punishes and standing pressure. Now you may be surprised since Estoc is one of the stronger, if not the strongest weapon for applying standing pressure. So why would I say that this setup isn't really that good? The thing is, if you roll with Estoc and Flame Spear, then you're essentially packing two weapons with absolutely terrible tracking, which is just a recipe for disaster. All you have to do to counter this setup is to roll towards the back of your opponent when he opens up with Spear, and do the rolling attack. As long as you have a weapon with viable rolling attack, you're good. The one-handed spear won't be able to track you, and your opponent can't really stagger it, since it's just too slow. Estoc, for example, is actually fast enough to get you with staggered R1s, but if your opponent opens up with Spear R1, then he's stuck in recovery, giving you a free hit. And if they don't start with Spear R1, well, then you just don't roll into it. So yeah, I think Estoc and Gargoyle Flame Spear combo, despite being incredibly good on paper, is just good when it comes to actual encounters. I'd say that Dark Sword paired with Flame Spear is a better setup, since it's pretty much the same setup as with Estoc, except you get a weapon that can cover your back a lot easier. However, the addition of Dark Sword doesn't really solve the tracking issues of Gargoyle Flame Spear, so matchups aside, if you meet a Flame Spear user on an arena that opens with more than one R1, just safely roll towards their back and enjoy your flawless victory. As I've explained earlier, good players use Spear to build neutral pressure exclusively. So let's just dive into the counter matchups, starting with the aforementioned Dark Sword Gargoyle Flame Spear combo. I think the best counter to it is luring Washing Pole combo. Now don't get me wrong, luring and Washing Pole trades are good against pretty much everything in the right hands. People often associate Washing Pole with bad players, but in reality, it is really hard to push Washing Pole to its limits, because to get a counter you need to hit your opponent with just a tip, and it's very tricky to land it if you have minimal experience with Washing Pole. With that being said, if you can get counter hits, you can safely trade with pretty much anything on this setup, especially the Flame Spear. Despite Gargoyle Flame Spear having relatively high attack rating, it comes from the split damage, and counter hits in Dark Souls apply only to physical attack rating, which means that, well, basically Flame Spear counters just suck, especially when compared to counter hit monsters like Washing Pole. Another factor in favor of Washing Pole in this matchup is that it has relatively good rolling attack, which means that if your opponent goes a bit trigger happy with the spear, you can punish it with ease. Second best setup against Dark Sword and Gargoyle Flame Spear combo is actually, surprise surprise, two-handed Gargoyle Flame Spear. Well, maybe it's not even a surprise, since it's second best weapon for applying neutral pressure, and I've just named Washing Pole the best weapon for applying the neutral pressure to be the best counter. But yeah, it works pretty much the same way, except you lose good rolling attack in favor of basically having superior spear in your pocket. Other than those two, I can't help but mention the spicy combo of Evelyn and Estoc, and I sort of feel bad mentioning it, because it's just like, you know, the best setup in the entire fucking game. But yeah, if you use that combo, just backpedal and bait Dark Sword R1s to get some damage in. Funnily enough, one-handed Flame Spear with fast offhand weapon does really well against certain meta setups and weapons, like Curved Sword for example. But generally, if you don't have much experience with it, it is very easy to fuck shit up. For example, if you don't know the range on your offhand weapon, you can be easily baited into making a swing with offhand weapon only to get whiff punished. Just generally saying that one-handed Flame Spear and Estoc or Dark Sword combo aren't exactly noob-friendly setups, and well, anyways. Now we move on to two-handed Gargoyle Flame Spear and its counters. And it's pretty much the same thing. The best counter to it is Washing Pole. It is probably even more dominant against two-handed spear than it is against one-handed spear. The reason to that is that you can just win every trait ever, and it is very unlikely that you're gonna get punished, since the spear is just not fast enough to make it happen. You can safely bait spear pokes and just roll towards your opponent's back, fishing for the rolling attack. Now, despite two-handed spear having less recovery compared to one-handed mode, it is still not enough to safely stagger it against the weapons with fast rolling attacks like Washing Pole. Now, since Gargoyle Flame Spear is a weapon that relies on neutral pressure, you can probably guess the next best counter I'm going to name. It's a shield. Shields are capable of killing pretty much every neutral pressure weapon in Dark Souls 3, because you can just pressure the shield, that's it, you just lose, it's not possible. Using Black Knight Shield against Gargoyle Flame Spear just breaks it, turning it into the most useless weapon in this matchup. In fact, I probably should have said that Black Knight Shield is the best counter to it. You just ignore the phantom range on dashing attacks. You just ignore the chip damage, and if you pack a fast weapon in main hand like Estoc or Dark Sword, you can just abuse the difference in frame data for good. Having a shield in this matchup makes it a joke. Not only you can reliably counter every move with your basic main hand moveset, you can also try to go for a pivot or straight backstabs, abusing the terrible tracking on Flame Spear, and the fact that you have a shield to safely get into the range. So guys, there you have it. The best neutral pressure weapon, as in the Washing Pole, is perfect choice for bullying Gargoyle Flame Spear users, since it does good against both one-handed and two-handed setups. Other than that, packing a shield is a good way to turn this matchup into a joke. Let me know in the comment section what other meta setups you want to see explored as part of this series. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.